much easier.
There we go.
Right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another fundraising talk. Today, we're going to be talking about planning tools. I think it's really imperative that we take a bit of time out in our day and just look at all the amazing options available around tools that you can use to do your planning. We all know that fundraising is very, very admin intensive, and it's about making sure that you've done your relevant planning within your own team, but within your own organization as well. So we're hoping to share lots of great models with you today and get you inspired about planning and getting your processes in place, which enables you to be fundraising ready. Over to you, Mel.
Thanks, Kelvin. Yeah, I'm just going to start with a couple of little housekeeping notes. I know we always have new folk joining us, which is really exciting, and we love having you. But just to let you know, if you can mute yourselves and switch off your video, it does help us a little bit with bandwidth. During the session, it would be appreciated. But of course, there is the wonderful chat function. You can see our little magenta arrow there. Please do feel free to pop questions into the chat, comments, anything you'd like to ask or would like to know. We will do our best to find answers for you.
And then, as always, ladies and gentlemen, this is recorded, so it will be in the cloud. We put it onto our YouTube channel, so you will have access to this entire presentation, plus about 40 others that we've done in Fundraising Talk. We will share the link on the WhatsApp group afterwards, so if folk missed it that wanted to join, they can also see the recording. So without further ado, Mel, am I going first or are you going first?
You go ahead.
Okay, cool. We'll go left to right. Good morning. My name is Kelvin Glen. Those are my contact details. My organization is Kalume SA, and we work with the charity sector in optimizing efficiencies and effectiveness around fundraising. And over to you, Mel.
Thanks. I do definitely see some new faces. So my name is Melanie Jackson. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Words That Count. And we work with nonprofits and with entrepreneurs and startups to make their words count as they prepare for investment. So our focus is very heavily on funding proposals, pitch decks, preparing to speak to investors and donors. So we're looking forward to 2021 being a really, really good year. I think it is going to be, in spite of that word beginning with a C that nobody ever wants to say. So we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to hand over to Kelvin.
All right. So we have done a whole session on finding your why. So if you missed that session, go onto our YouTube channel, and it's a whole presentation on Simon Sinek's methodology around why. But it's really, really important to connect with your why. And Simon Sinek basically says that people do not buy what you do. They buy into why you do it. And what we find in the charity sector is that a lot of people are harping on and continuously talking about what they do, and they forget about the why. The why being is, what is your impact? How is a life being changed? How is a community being changed? How is an environment being changed because of your programs and interventions? So the first thing in your strategy and your planning is you really have to reconnect with your why. And I really encourage you, if you haven't seen the presentation, go and watch it. There's great workshop tools there to do the why workshop with your team.
Definitely. Sorry, I'm just muting some folk who were a little bit noisy. I hope people don't mind me summarily muting them. It does become a bit distracting for other folk. I wanted to add on to why you need to draft a why statement and what a why statement is. So I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. Kelvin and I both are. And the session that we did last year around how to do this is a really interesting one. It's a facilitated workshop. And there's a great book about finding your why that you can actually buy. And it takes you step by step through the process of drafting a why statement. And people often say to me, oh, we've got a mission statement and we've got a vision statement. Why do we need a why statement? And my response to that is a why statement to me is your lodestar. It's the thing that guides every activity. It's the thing that you hold everything you do up against and go, does that fit with why we're doing what we do? And as Kelvin said, it's so easy to talk about what we do and how we do it. it becomes a lot more challenging to get back into your why. And this exercise looks at all kinds of things. It looks at why people decided to apply for their jobs, what makes them proud about the organization, what words, and that's the fun part, being as words are my thing. I think that's the best bit, is what words describe why we do what we do. And the simplest way that Simon Sinek and his team recommend is to do a little statement that starts to do what so that something happens. So to do the organization's contribution so that there is impact. And there's two corporate examples on the slide. Kelvin, you wanted to add?
No. I was going to say that the really great thing about the why statement is that once you've contextualized it and you've agreed on it, it is a very, very succinct, simple statement that anyone in the organization, and in fact, everybody in the organization, I always say carries it in their top pocket, should know it off the top of their heads. That's your 10-second elevator speech, and people go, so what does this organization do? Your why statement should really encapsulate that. So once you've done the exercise, share it far and wide with your donors, on your website, with your team, your volunteers, your beneficiaries. We found that's much easier than being able to regurgitate a 5-sentence mission statement, which is always very theoretical.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you can make it very relatable. And with some of the exercises that I've done recently with clients, we've really been able to do that. And the two examples that we've got at the moment are corporate examples. Asana, which, as you know, is a planning project management tool to help humanity thrive by enabling all teams to work together effortlessly. Very nice. I don't know if anybody's worked in a team. That's a pretty lofty goal. And then, of course, Uber, although one wonders about this one, but maybe we shouldn't go there. Transportation as reliable as running water everywhere for everyone. Now, I found it quite difficult to fit the two so that model. So I used something else. We believe that. And it's a lot simpler. But for me, it is fundamentally about our beliefs and what we believe about ourselves and about our organization and why we're there to do the things that we do. So I really recommend I start every planning session with this exercise. And I don't care if it's been done before. I don't care if it was done last week. It is amazing what comes out in these why statement sessions. And the most important thing for me is you can see if somebody is not on board with your plan. And then you know that is somebody who is not going to stay very long in your organization. And either they will jump themselves or they might need a little push, but you don't want them if they don't buy in to your why statement.
Absolutely.
So this for me is it's a grounding process. It sets the scene and it should inform everything that then unfolds during your strategic planning process. So just a quick aside, what Kelvin and I have done here is we've pulled together all of the things that we do, the elements that we put into a planning session. And we're quickly showing them to you in the form of tools. This normally takes at least a day, sometimes 2 days, depending on the size and the scope of the organization. So this is a very, very quick snapshot. If there's something that you don't understand or that doesn't make sense to you, please feel free to pop it in the chat.
Give us a call. Yeah.
Give us a call. We're happy to talk you through it. But for now, pop it in the chat. We'll try and answer you if we can. If it looks like it's a big one, then give us a shout and we'll try and talk you through it. Because this is critical. If you don't plan, you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have a roadmap. So really, really important that we keep a handle on that. Back to you, Kelvin.
Right. So we're preaching to the converted, but we like to remind people that fundraising is everybody's job. The perception of many organizations, and we often find this especially with boards and senior executives, oh, we've appointed fundraisers, so we're going to get our 10 million rand budget in 3 months. Fantastic, all's great. Well, sorry for you, it doesn't work like that. Fundraising is everybody's responsibility. And your role in fundraising is to coordinate, to lead, to bring it all together. And I always say to people, fundraisers are no different to sales teams. If the sales team does not have a product to sell and does not have clients to sell to, they can't sell. And in the fundraising sector, if you don't have programs that are well shaped, well thought out, have great impact, well reported on, and you don't have donors to talk to, you've got nothing to sell or to fundraise for. So our job is to educate everybody in our team, and to be outlook and look at opportunities in the sense of making sure that we are looking at fundraising from a broad lens, not a narrow lens. And also, even in the why statement exercise and some of these other tools we're going to share with you today, it's really important that you bring as many people into the conversation as possible. I remember having a wow moment when I was having a conversation with somebody in an organization that I was working in, and she literally was the lady that, sort of cleaned the office and made sure all, the kitchen was clean and everybody was happy. And we were having a conversation about our work, and her description of the impact of our work in the community from where she came was mind-blowing. But we all have this lens of, well, she's just the cleaner, what does she know? Or it's just the driver, or it's just the community worker, or it's just the care worker, or it's just the person running the math center. Speak to everyone in your organization and help them to understand your why statement, but also listen to them, because they will share with you some wonderful stories and also share with you your successes that you weren't aware of. So our job is to educate, our job is to bring the team together and to really look at the outlook of funding opportunities and constantly asking the questions. Why is this important? Why is this donor going to be a great match for us? Why do we need this funding for this program? Often what we find is that the programmatic people will come to you and say, we need money for this program. And you go, yes, no, not a problem. We'll go raise the money. But unless you understand why you need to raise that money for that specific program, and what is going to be the impact of that program, and what is the niche service or opportunity or program that you're implementing in the community, and what is the difference that you're going to make, unless we have that, it's very difficult to go out and get those donors. So your job is critical, or our job is critical to any organization. We're the glue that holds it together. But we also need to make sure we've got the relationships internally for our team to understand the importance of our role, and that it is our role to bring everyone together and put the puzzle together so we can present that puzzle to the donors and get the impact and the investment from our donors.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, we all need to be looking for fundraising opportunities all the time. It's really critical that we educate everyone around us about how to do that. And one of the stories I always tell is I'm Cape Town based. And those of you who are from Cape Town know that there are very few head offices left in Cape Town. Everything, of course, has moved up to Johannesburg. And when I travel to Johannesburg, and I'm talking about sort of pre-COVID days, because, who travels anymore? But when we get to travel again, once herd immunity has been achieved and all of that, I take photographs of every logo I don't recognize. As I drive up the freeway past Woodmead or somewhere like that, and you can see all of those factories and offices along the highway, take photographs of the logos, find out who they are. Because everyone says, well, how do we do prospect research? And the quick answer is to say, oh, go and buy a guide, go and buy a resource. You don't need a resource. What you need is a good set of eyes in Google. So please keep in mind, everybody has family. Those family members have jobs. Some of them, thank goodness, hopefully might even be wealthy. That would be lovely. But keep them in mind. Everybody knows somebody who could help. So it's really important that we keep that top of mind for everyone. So I'm going to quickly start us off here on the next section, which is basically your environmental scanning. And there are lots of tools for that. We're going to talk just about two of them. But I want to just talk more broadly at the moment. When we're doing our planning, you have to look at what's going on the outside. things like the megastorm that's hit Texas. What is the impact of that potentially on our business?
Mm.
You know, we don't think maybe nothing, but maybe there's a massive head office there that's going to be affected globally, and it's going to affect our ability to raise funds from that organization. Political shifts. I mean, my goodness, the last few years, from Zuma to Brexit to Trump to all manner of things. I think we're seeing, and because we're such a global village now, you know, China sneezes and everybody caught COVID, but let's perhaps not go there. But we have to look at, we can't ignore what's happening on the outside, because while we don't have any control over it, we need to look at how we can mitigate the impact of things like that.
So Melanie, if I can add on to that, because I think it's also important for people to understand that we're part of a global community. So, you know, if you take things like environmental organizations that are looking after the, you know, education around the oceans, you know, everyone says, oh, well, you know, clean up the beaches in Cape Town and we've done our job. But the ocean is so vast. So if someone throws litter in the ocean 600 miles away, it can land up on the beach in Cape Town. So it's also about knowing what's happening in the global landscape. And that's where it's a bit off track, but it's so important that as organizations, you're also putting out opinion pieces, lobby pieces about the impact of your work. Also, when you're talking about scanning landscapes, it's about being abreast of deals that are going down, in the sense of companies that are merging, subsidiaries that are joining, that are being bought out by bigger subsidiaries. We saw this happen horribly a couple of years ago, where there was a certain big company that bought up everything they could find, from plants to motor vehicles to cleaning companies, whatever. And this global consortium just sucked up all these little companies that were giving money to charity, and then sort of said, well, no, our CSR strategy is that, so sorry for you. But unless you're aware of that, you don't know the risk for you as an organization with your donors. So a lot of our work is to be scanning and watching what's going on, understanding what's going on, and then putting in risk mitigation and making sure your relationship is so strong with your donor that they continue to lobby to support you when a head office makes a decision that we're changing policy. Because sometimes it's beyond the mandate of the CSR manager. But if you've got a good relationship, hopefully they will fight your fight for you in the boardroom. All right.
Definitely.
Is this one mine?
Tis.
Right. Sorry. Right. So on that environment, who's around you? And this is an interesting one, because we don't take enough time to watch what our competitors are doing. And I say this flippantly, because as much as we all love each other and we're nice and we're all doing good work and we're all serving humanity and we're all working for charity, sorry, when it comes to fundraising, we're competitors. Because if a donor gives me money and doesn't give you money, it means that you lose. If a donor gives you money and not me money, it means I lose. So you need to be watching what your competitors are doing. You need to be reading the annual report and then watching the websites of people that are working in your space, geographically, as well as your sector. Because what we tend to do is watch our sector. So if we're in animal welfare, we look at what every other animal welfare organization is doing. But we don't look geographically of who else is playing in our backyard. For number one, competition, but also opportunities to collaborate, which goes on to point number two, which is forming partnerships and alliances. We're starting to see a lot more donors dictating and saying, we want to deal with gender-based violence, but we want 4 different charities doing 4 different things to form a consortium to address a gender-based violence program in South Africa. So if you don't know who your partners are and you haven't got a good relationship with them, how do you start putting together a joint proposal in a collaboration or consortium manner? And then watch your contributors. You need to know exactly who is contributing. I was looking at something the other day, and the interesting thing is that they were saying that in the United States, 40% of a director of fundraising's time is spent on doing data analysis, analyzing exactly what's going on, where the money's coming from, the trends, the behaviors, the ups, the downs, the roundabouts. And I think we're at the back foot, because we generally in South Africa have got smaller fundraising teams raising more money, but you really, really, really need to spend some time analyzing your data. And if you are on a CRM system, you can pull lovely reports. If you're not, well, you're going to have to become a guru on Excel. But you really need to have look at your data and analyze it to understand what your trends are. And don't do it only at the end of the year, do it monthly. And that's part of planning. What is my budget for this month? How did I achieve it? If I didn't achieve it, why not? And did I achieve it based on the segmentation I required? So some charities say we've got to raise R1 million a month. We raised R1 million, great. But that might have come from one person. That doesn't mean you're being successful in your fundraising. So really, really analyze what's going on and know what is happening with the sector internally, as well as knowing what's happening with your sector externally. And then, as we've put on the slide here, do what they do. If another charity is successfully raising money, you really need to sit back and say, well, what are they doing right and what am I doing wrong? And it might not be you personally. It might be your organization. It might be your why statement. It might be that you have weak leadership. It might be that you need to pivot and shift your program because you haven't adjusted to the times. There's a plethora of reasons, but you've got to be able to be critically honest with yourself and say, why are we not achieving? And even if you are achieving, how can we achieve more? So look at what everybody else is doing and learn from them. And then with alliances, make sure that the partners you get on board complement and support you. You don't want to be in a codependent, destructive relationship. And not every relationship works. And sometimes you've got to be big enough to say, thanks, but no thanks, and walk away. We sometimes get sucked into it. And the same goes with donors. It's not an easy thing, but sometimes you actually got to fire a donor and say, thank you very much, but we actually don't want to partner with you. Not because we don't need your money, but for the following reasons. Do it sensitively, but sometimes you have to walk away from relationships.
Absolutely. And that's sometimes a difficult thing to do, especially because, particularly with donors, it's often seen as a kind of an unequal relationship and one where you're always on the back foot. But it shouldn't be that way. And in fact, if it is that way, it's toxic. So we need to be aware of these things. And I know it's difficult because money is so hard to secure. And now we're saying, well, give it away if it's not the right money. The right money does come. We just have to be, and the thing I tell all of my clients, all you have is your reputation. Don't throw it away on a dodgy donor.
Absolutely.
So yeah, this opportunity is really for you to take a long, hard look at what you can change and a long, hard look at what you can't change, but what you can do to mitigate risks. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the various tools that you can use. And of course, the SWOT analysis has been with us since dinosaurs roamed the earth. And it's because it works. And what I wanted to highlight is, if you have a look at the way that I've designed this little slide, it's to show you specifically what you potentially have control over and what you don't have control over. Because it's really important to acknowledge that. Getting your underwear in a knot because of a decision that Trump made around women's reproductive health, it's counterproductive, and it's just going to make your underwear uncomfortable. So you've got to look at the things you can control and see what steps you can take to control them, or what dance moves you need to learn to dance around the problems that you don't have any control over. And particularly what this does, and I've had some amazing sessions with this, when we look at opportunities, because we get very caught up in what we already do. We don't look at the new opportunities that are presented, and because things change, it potentially opens a space for us that we wouldn't have had before, but we don't look at those spaces. And an exercise like this makes you stand back and go, where do we have an opportunity? And conversely, where do we have a threat? And what's quite interesting is very often we shift points around on this little table. Something we thought was an opportunity may actually turn out to be a threat to us. And conversely, something that we're very afraid of and we're very concerned about actually could very well be an opportunity that we just haven't framed the right way. So again, simple, straightforward, so successful, so useful. And I would recommend that every time you review your strategy, which should be several times in the year, you actually do this exercise again. It's the one thing that you pick up and you do at every review session, because these things change all the time. And of course, there are other ways. And I'm going to hand over to Kelvin for this one.
All right, so this is the pestle model. And for those of you that are academic junkies, you would have probably seen it. Google it, there's different frameworks you can use to get to the pestle model. But basically the pestle model looks at your landscape, and it really deep dives into 6 quadrants. One is political. So it's analyzing the politics in the sense of services, infrastructure, tax policies, regulation. And obviously we put words in that are relevant to the charity sector. But you know, if tomorrow government changes policy and it has an impact on your work, you need to be analyzing and being aware of that. You need to know, like the tax policy, you know, if the tax policy changes, you need to be aware of it so you can educate your donors. Regulations, you know, you need to make sure that you are registered and that you are legit and that you are doing all the right things from a political perspective. Economic, you obviously got to be watching this like a hawk. You know, your growth rate, your inflation rates, your labor costs, your business cycle. What is it that you can improve? Often we see organizations grow faster than what they can handle. All things like inflation whacks you, labor costs, you know, you might be in a regulated sector if you're dealing with things like nurses or teachers. So it's about watching what's on the economic landscape. Social and cultural is very important as well. How is the demographic of the areas in which, the geographical areas in which you work, changing? Are you abreast with what's happening in the communities that you serve? How is education changing? And how do you educate around the changes? Cultural norms. You know, if you're working in a community that has suddenly had an influx of new members from a different culture, you've got to be able to be sensitive. And I remember this one when I was working a lot in food security. And a donor got highly irate with me when we had to go back and apologize because we made a horrible boo-boo. We assumed and presumed that a certain meal that we had designed for a school feeding program would work. And it didn't, because it didn't fit the palates of the community. And we had to go back to the donor and say, well, our impact here has been really, really bad because there was a lot of wastage because the children didn't like this particular meal because it wasn't palatable. And of course, the donor was like, well, are they unappreciative? I mean, really? But we have to respect the cultural norms and respect the beneficiaries. We may be supporting them and helping them, but they're still individuals and they're still human beings. And that's a tricky one to manage. And then income distribution, you know, and a typical one is making sure that you understand, again, the demographic of the communities that you're serving, and that you're understanding you've got good research on the average income in that community, the unemployment rates, you know, what are the issues, because this is all stuff that also helps shape your business case when you're talking to donors. Technological, well, I think because of the horrid C word the last year, we've all had to catch a big wake up with this one. You know, so, but how do you embrace technology? And a lot of us were caught on the back foot when COVID hit, because we had used Zoom, we had used Skype, but we weren't gurus on it, and it wasn't an everyday thing. And bandwidth in South Africa and in Africa is very expensive. I mean, one of the projects I'm working on, you know, was quite a difficult one to motivate the donors to say, but we need more money for data because all of our meetings with our teams are now online and it's expensive. So you really need to know what's happening with technology, constantly looking at new emerging technologies that can help you be more efficient and your impact in your reporting, in your R&D, in your communications. I think that the paper businesses, SAP is probably going to be crying because, you know, gone are the days we print newsletters and post them. Everything's electronic. But are you doing it effectively? And again, to one of the slides before, I always say to fundraisers, if you are not subscribed to all your competitors' databases and you're not donating to other charities, you're doing yourself a disservice, because the best way to know how to not treat a donor is to be a donor, because you then appreciate and get really uptight when they send you badly worded stuff or pixelated photographs in an appeal. So technology is really important. I'm going to whip along legal. And we had a really, really, really good session 2 weeks ago on NGO law. So if you haven't seen that, please go watch it in the YouTube channel. It was fantastic. Nicola gave us some fantastic insight around Section 18As. But know your legal status nationally and locally. Know the story around law enforcement, your court systems. The Poppy Act is coming in, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope that you're all working on it, because if you're not prepared, you're going to get caught again on the back foot. And then ecological. Look at your resource management. Look at your greening program. Look at available alternative energies, because if you have power outages in your communities that you're serving or at your head office, you can have the best technology in the world. If you have power outages, you can't work. So what is your available options around resources, around greening and alternative energies? We also need to be pushing the agenda, which it's a personal hobby horse of mine. We as organizations are not doing enough to go green. We see a lot in the communities. We set up these beautiful centers in the community. We are not pushing our donors and insisting that part of building the building is building a green building that has either solar or wind or alternative energies. We are not looking at recycling programs in those communities. We have a moral responsibility to make sure that when we're talking to our donors, we push the boundary and ask them for additional funding for things like greening, because unless you're pushing alternative energies, we're being a bit hypocritical, because we are putting further strain on the grid in communities that are already under-resourced. Know your directorates and who to be following as far as the departments. And in South Africa, we have a number of departments. You can't just be aligned to one department. You've got to know your departments nationally, provincially, and locally. Ecological, and these last two things this last one, because I've touched on climate change, but this last one's really, really important. And we saw it with COVID, workforce health. Psychosocial support and the well-being of your team is imperative. That should be priority number one, because if you're not looking after your team, how can we serve the community? It's really, really, really important to make sure that your team are what I call watered and fed. So they've got the right resources, they are supported, they have the right inputs so that they can deliver and be able to deliver your programs. And then obviously we touched on climate change, but you need to be aware of the impact of climate change on your program. So the PESTEL model, again, it's not something you do once a year. You need to be watching all the time. So if something in the political landscape is going to affect your business, you need to be reviewing it and saying, okay, what is the impact? What is the risk mitigation? And how do we work around this? And as Melanie said, some of them you can't control, but you've got to be able to tap dance around it, because you can't sit back and go, well, woe is me, we can't do our work because of a policy. Mel, over to you.
Thank you. So I use this slide a lot. I really like it because it's real. This is actually the actual fundraising mix of a nonprofit based in Cape Town, quite parochial, in the City Bowl, working with the homeless. And it's one of the most balanced fundraising mixes I've ever seen. And I think that we don't pay enough attention to our sources of income and making sure that we diversify our sources of income. Because what will happen is one sector may go pear-shaped, but they very seldom all go pear-shaped at the same time. So it's a fantastic risk mitigation strategy to look at as many resources and as many sources of income as we can to make sure that we spread that risk nicely, that the loss of one donor is not a tragedy. I mean, I have seen people where 50% is one donor. If that donor decides they no longer wish to support you, you will have to halve the size of your organization like that.
And Melanie, you will halve the impact of your beneficiaries.
Well, I think you bring it down to a quarter. Yeah. It's crazy. So if you have a look here, it starts with, I'm going to start at the 17%, the blue over here. That's trusts and foundations, individuals, service organizations, governments, international sources, cause-related marketing, I'm very impressed with that, income generation, and corporate funding.
Mm.
If I could make one criticism of this, I would like to see the individual slice of pie be a little bit bigger.
Oh. Mm.
I'd like to see it at least 15%, maybe even a bit more. But for
Yeah.
me, spreading the risk like this is an absolute gift.
And Melanie, just on this one, a lovely exercise to do, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if you plug the numbers into Excel, you can populate this in 30 seconds. And what I suggest you do is you take your year end from last year, plug the numbers in, print it in color, put it above your desk, give it to your CEO and put it above their desk, and then do the same exercise in the ideal world. So where do we want to be in the next 2 to 3 years? Then out of that, you can develop your strategy. So in other words, if you need to increase your individual giving, we need to then shape all of our asks, our strategy, our everything. If we need to reduce government relations, how do you do that without upsetting government, but sensitively? But really do this exercise. And I always say, do it for the year. And then if you really want to be creative, do it every quarter to see where you are. Because the interesting thing is that if you pull these reports monthly and then populate it to a total for the year, you will see throughout the months the numbers do this. I mean, it's just madness. So it's a really lovely exercise to do. It's colorful. It's 30 seconds. You can read it. And it's just a good slap in the face that reminds us we need to be a little bit more agile, because we all get complacent, because it's very easy when you're reaching your targets to go, oh, great, relief. But there's always opportunity to grow another segment of this wheel to make sure that it's balanced. So it's a really nice exercise to do. And for those of you that are stalwarts, that are on our sessions regularly, we on our hobby horse about the fundraising mix, literally, I think every second presentation. So please use it. It's a great tool.
Yes, and we've got a couple of little ways of doing that coming up. So some nice practical hints and tips. Over to you.
Right. So why do we need a plan? I mean, planning is, and I love the graphic, because I presume that's a stool to milk cows, but the bottom line is if one of those legs are broken, you ain't going to be milking no cow, and you ain't going to get no milk from the cow to feed the people.
Exactly.
So it's a lovely graphic, and you'll learn with Melanie now, that's the way we like to work. We articulate things in a graphic and then in words. But the fundraising, the marketing, the public relations really support your sustainability. And I would say there's probably a fourth leg in the future, Mel, which is your impact reporting or your R&D. But we have to have a plan. You've got to have a plan to secure that long-term sustainability for the organization. And I want to bleat on this one, because it's such a hard balance to get right. When you're trying to look at the 3-year plan and look at multi-year donors across the fundraising mix, but you got the finance manager banging on your door saying, we need money to pay the rent at the end of the month. It's such a hard mix to get right. But you've got to be able to juggle that and be a bit of a performer, no pun intended for Zip Zap, but you've got to be able to be a performer in fundraising, because you've got to have 10 balls in the air at any one time. But planning is imperative. And if you don't get your planning right, you're not going to fail, but you're going to fumble along and you're going to be exhausted. So please put time into planning. So our recommendation is, with marketing and fundraising and public relations, and even your impact or your R&D team and your programs team, you really need to meet at least annually and look at those operational and project costs. So when the finance team slap that budget together and it gets tick boxed at the board level, before it even gets there, you need to really, really, really interrogate it and understand the why. So why do we need money for this? Why has this gone up by 10%? Why have our beneficiary numbers gone down? Why are we going into a new community when we've still got a community we're serving? Why have we given the staff a 3% increase this year? Because these are the questions your donors are going to be asking you, ladies and gentlemen. And I always say to people, we're the bit of the Grinch, because in those meetings, the rest of the team are like, really, come on, do you have to ask all these questions? But at the end of the day, if we're not prepared And I've been on the other end of the fence where I've been in a donor's seat and run big funds. And you pick up the phone to the fundraiser and you say, thank you very much for your budget and proposal. It looks lovely. But let's just talk about this and just tell me, how you got to this cost. And it's like, yeah, but I have to come back to you. So then you know that the fundraiser took the finance manager's budget, slapped it into the proposal and went send. You need to know what's going on. So you need to be imperatively informed and be able to answer any question from a donor. So I'm going to whip along in the interest of time. Make sure you're looking at your diversified income streams, which is your wheel. And you see now that the school teacher's really pushing. Make sure you got that fundraising mix right. As we said, look at your human capital. People that work in the charity sector are special. You don't want to lose them if they're good. Increase your organization's public profile. And there's a whole workshop we can do on that one. And then look at those strategic partnerships. But planning is imperative. You may move on, madam.
Why, thank you, kind sir. So something I always get on my hobby horse about is the difference between a program and a project. And we tend to use these words interchangeably, and that's not strictly correct. So part of your planning process has to be, as Kelvin said, those conversations with your implementation teams to decide what you are fundraising for and be very clear about what pockets of money are needed. So the way that I describe it is you have your organization at the top of the pile, and then you'll have a program. And let's use HIV as an example. You have an HIV program. Within that program, you may have a prevention of infection project, a mother-to-child transmission project,
testing,
and an OVCs project, orphan and vulnerable children. Your fundraising happens at project level. It happens at the smallest possible intervention that can have a budget of its own. So be very clear with your teams what your programs are and what the projects are that make up those programs. Some organizations, it's simple, it's straightforward. You have projects. You work in a very focused sector. So you have projects around, maybe you are an HIV organization and you only have HIV projects. That's fine. But just be clear when you're talking, the program is the umbrella. The project is the thing that you're fundraising for. Kelvin, back to you.
Yeah. So are your organization's needs clear? So it's a lovely follow-on slide. Thank you, Melanie. Do you know your projects? Do you know your core running costs for each project? Not the whole organization, but each project. And also, if you have got a head office or even the fundraiser's salary needs to be absorbed because no one wants to pay those head office costs. So you need to know your running costs. You need to be building an endowment fund and be unapologetic about this. I always say to donors, it's bank charges, unapologetic. Because unless you've got money for a rainy day, you're actually running irresponsibly. And you need to make sure that you can protect the donor's money. Some organizations have a straight policy that a percentage of all funds go straight into the endowment fund and it's not negotiable. You've got to build that endowment fund. Your biggest challenge for any fundraiser is capital. But you need to know what your capital budget is going to be and why those capital pieces are important. So it's all great people saying, no, we want to feed the children. But if there's no vehicle and no stove to make the food, how are we going to get the food to the people? And then obviously your others, which is your conference, your travel, your development work, your website development, Do you have an expansion plan? Have you costed that? And then this is coming through a lot these days in funding application, ladies and gentlemen, where the applicants, where the funding application form is saying, what is your sustainability plan? And that doesn't mean planting trees in the garden. How is this organization going to be sustainable for the next 3 years? Because if I bring my brand and partner with you, I need to make sure you're going to be around. And then the big cohort, which whacked us last year, and you will always have it in any organization, in any country in the world, make sure you're planning for those unforeseen and emergency needs. Make sure that you have got those resources available. So understand your needs so that you can shape those proposals and those business cases really well articulated, and that when the donor phones you, you don't have that fumble, I don't know answer.
Absolutely. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Kelvin has already touched on it. We are at a stage in the development of the nonprofit sector in South Africa where we are too big. There are too many organizations doing the same things, very often not very well.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID is giving us an opportunity to right-size our sector. And one of the ways that you can be a survivor of that right-sizing process, because there will be collateral damage along the way.
Oh, there, you back? No, you're back, you're back,
back.
you're back. Sorry, we lost you for a second.
It wasn't me. I think my internet must have dipped. So what I was saying is the way that you're going to survive this right sizing of the sector is by being able to show your impact. If you can't show your impact, donors do not know the change that you've brought about. If they don't know the change, they're not going to fund it. So really, really critical that you look at how you show impact as part of this planning process.
All right. It's not a scary word, but some people find it very scary when we talk about a fundraising audit. But just like the financial audit, you need to be doing a fundraising audit every single year. And if you've got the resources, and I say that flippantly, get an independent person in to help. Because you know what? There is no ways you as the fundraiser is going to be 110% honest with yourself. That's human nature. But you've got to be doing that fundraising audit. And you've got to be looking at the past trends and the history, what worked, what didn't work. Critically be honest and look at yourself and say, why didn't this work? It's not a failure. It's lessons learned. And it just means that if you learn today, you're not going to make the same mistake tomorrow. And then, so there's two parts to the audit. It's internal. Where did we do boo-boos? Where did we cost wrong? Where did we underspend, overspend? Where did we underachieve, overachieve? What can we do better? And then there's an outside view. So you look externally to say, what is the sector doing? What is history telling us? What are the opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And you can do it in half a day, but sit with your team and get as many people around the table as possible and it can honestly just be a conversation with a couple of slides, but have an honest conversation and analyze honestly and critically based on facts, not on emotion. So based on facts. So if you needed to bring in R1 million from individuals and you only brought in 850,000 Rand, you didn't achieve target. How and why didn't you achieve target? What could you have done better? If you raised 1.1 million Rand, fantastic. What was the lessons learned? That means we can take that up to 1.2 next year. So a fundraising audit is, again, and the reason why we're giving you all these tools, put them in your diary as an annual planning session, and they're in the diary. They're as critical as doing a proposal. You have to do these exercises.
Definitely. So what I wanted to show you quickly actually goes back to our little wheel of your fundraising sources. And this is one of the analyses that you can undertake as part of that audit process. Is you take a source, so maybe it's trusts and foundations. What did you get in 2018? What did you get in 2019 and in 2020? What does that mean? Is there a trend? Is there a clear decline? And what I also encourage people to do is don't just look at the numbers in terms of income. Look at the numbers in terms of how many of that source did you have? Because it might be that your income went up, but the number of organizations supporting you actually went down. And that's very dangerous because, again, it speaks to that balance. So what is the trend? The trend is we're managing to maintain our money, but from fewer people. That increases our risk if we lose somebody. What do we need to do to correct that? So it's a really simple way. I'm not a very technical person. I like things to be really straightforward. So I love this kind of thing. And there's another one. So now you're going to, once you've finished looking at the past, you need to look at the future. So I'm going to hand back to Kelvin for this one.
And I mean, it's straightforward. What do we need? How much do we expect to raise from each source based on that wheel? How long do you think it'll take to take money to come in? So the biggest faux pas we all make is, oh, we're going to get money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We fill in the 40-page application. We press send. And the CEO knocks on your door the next morning and says, the money in the bank. No, that's an 18-month process. Sorry for you. So also don't fob the truth. Be honest in your planning. But know that the investment you put in today into that proposal will come in 18 months' time. And then what is the return on investment, the cost to benefit ratio? Very simple to calculate. And then what are the anticipated costs? So also like that, when you're putting in a proposal for 18 months time, and you know you're going to implement the project in 2 years time, make sure that you've costed that project properly. Don't cost it on today's costs, because I promise you petrol in 2 years time is going to be more expensive. Food in 2 years time is going to be more expensive. And I have made that mistake time and time again, and then realized, oh, damn. So make sure that you're taking inflation into account, and that you work with the finance team to help you put that budget together.
Yes.
In fact, finance should be signing off that budget and developing the budget with you. We're not finance people and the board. And then how urgent is the process? Prioritize. And this is always a hard one as well, because often fundraisers are forever got a to-do list of 40 things, but it is about getting that priority right. But don't miss the deadline for a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation because you're doing a 1,000 Rand please letter for loaves of bread from the cafe around the corner. Get those priorities right.
So very quickly, here's another little table that you can use to populate those very things. Again, you start with your funding source. How much do you want to raise in the next 3 years from them? What is the time frame on that return on investment? Because as Kelvin has said, your bigger organizations are taking 18 to 24 months to make decisions. So you have to know what does that mean in terms of the return on investment? Do you have a high return against your costs? Is it moderate? Is it low? You know, if you look at individuals, you have a lovely return in terms of income if you've got a nice individual program. But you've got to realize that your costs are high, and you've got to factor that in. So where should you be spending the bulk of your time, the bulk of your energy? And that's where you look at prioritizing it. You know, it may be that you really want individuals, but you know that you cannot put a newsletter out every 2 weeks or every month. Then don't go there, because it's just going to frustrate you, and you probably will end up failing. You're setting yourself up for failure. So take the time to do these plans and learn from others. Please feel free to ask your questions on the group, and don't make the mistakes we did, make new ones. So we have whizzed through that at such speed.
And we always think we're going to have 15 minutes left, and we don't. So we literally have 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. But as Melanie promised, if we can't answer the question, we will come back to you. We will try our best. So let's look at the chat. So some of the questions that have come up.
So far, we just have one, which is great, from Mary, about growing the individual donor database.
Yeah, Mary, I think that's a lovely question, but I see it as a great opportunity. You know, I think that especially now with COVID, the world has become a lot more caring. And I think that individuals want to give. It's our human nature. The challenge for the charity sector is, number one, I was having a conversation with somebody this morning. Number one is we make it very difficult sometimes for people to give. If I go onto a website and I'm going to do 40 click-throughs and fill in 14 forms, forget it. But if I can snap something with my phone in 30 seconds and sign up a pledge or a opportunity for me to control the giving, I'm done. But it's also back to that why, the first slide. If you've got a compelling why statement, not every individual is going to align with your cause, but if they're an animal lover and you've got a compelling why statement, they will align with your cause. And if you're an animal charity, if you are saving the rainforests in Brazil, they might not align with you. But like anything, you've got to ask 100 people to get 10 people to sign up. But individual giving is lovely low-hanging fruit, because you're talking directly to the decision maker. It's not going to a CSR manager or a board. And once they sign up, you're communicating back directly with that individual, that decision maker. And individual giving is a journey. The mistake a lot of charities and boards make is they think that we signed up Kelvin, so the job's done. No, your sign up is step one. The hardest part of individual giving is donor retention. how do you keep me giving every day, every month? And how do you inspire me so much that when I've got an extra 10 Rand, instead of buying a cup of coffee, I give it to you? That's successful individual giving. Individual giving is a 20-year journey. And you want to take them from giving the 50 Rand a month, and as they grow in their career, right up to, if we are truly successful, that individual will leave you a legacy. But it's a journey. It's not a quick win. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and it takes resources to do it. So I don't want to scare you, but if you're going to do individuals, you better be ready from your communications and your marketing perspective and your donor retention. Donor acquisition is the easy part with individuals. Donor retention is the hardest part. Mel, anything else on that?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think on a very practical level, it's finding where your donors are, where your prospects are. Are they on social media? Are they on your website? Do you have to attend a function to find them? Do they have to sign up to your newsletter? It's really, yeah, it's a bit of a detective hunt story to find particularly individuals. It's not quite the same as corporates and trusts and foundations.
Sorry, Mel, carry on.
No, I was just going to say it's a huge commitment.
And I always say that your donor, if you're doing individual giving right, your current donors are your best marketing tool.
Yes.
Because if I'm giving you 100 Rand a month, or 200 Rand, or 500 Rand a month, I should be able to convince people at a bra at my home to sign up as well. But make sure you empower your donors and ask them to ask others. We sometimes are too scared to ask. So be strategic in your communications to say, Kelvin, thank you so much for giving. You've given us for the last year. Can you ask your family to join you? Or can you ask your colleagues to join you? Or can you introduce us to your business? And maybe we can do employee giving. So a current donor is your best mechanism to grow your database. But it's the how and the why is the hard part.
For sure. Kelvin, I'm going to have to ask you if we can cut off there because you want to chat quickly about the Resource Alliance.
Yes, let's go on to that. So, as you all know, I'm an ambassador for the Resource Alliance for Southern Africa, and the Resource earrings. You need to unplug your earphones, remember? Sorry. And the Resource Alliance is the world's biggest movement for social change. Have you unplugged, Mel? Okay. So basically what we're going to do is just show you a very quick video about what they do and inspire you to sign up to become members of the Resource Alliance. It's an opportunity of exactly what we've created with Fundraising Talk, but they have done for the last 40 years on a global scale. And both Melanie and I have been privileged to attend the international conferences before. So without further ado, I'm going to let Melanie show the video because of time.
We face great challenges. Economies around the world have slumped. There are massive job losses, and some governments are cutting back on foreign aid and reducing spending on domestic poverty alleviation. As a result, income has declined, forcing many social impact organizations to reduce services, furlough staff, and in some cases close their doors. This could not come at a worse moment. Climate change, conflict, and COVID-19 has pushed as many as 150 million more people into extreme poverty. There has never been a more important time for us to come together, to challenge norms, push boundaries, and open our minds to new ways of generating critical resources for social good. For 40 years, the Resource Alliance has brought the global social impact sector together through the IFC, FRO, pop-ups, and Emerge to unleash new ideas, new models, and new thinking to accelerate progress in the world. Now, through the power of digital, every fundraiser and changemaker anywhere in the world can connect, learn, and share through the Resource Alliance global community. As a friend and member of the global community, you will have year-round access to world-class resources, knowledge, peer support, and thought-provoking conversations to help build better resourced, more resilient, and effective social impact organizations. Diverse and inclusive, the global community brings us together to grow through learning and grow even more through sharing. Because when we do, we have the greatest hope of building a more just, equitable, and healthy world for everyone. Visit community.resource-alliance.org to sign up.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the great thing about Resource Alliance is that there is free stuff that you can sign up for, which gives you limited access to global networks. And then there's a paid platform as well, which is the more in-depth, basically online classes and online webinars and stuff. So we are sensitive of time and we respect everyone's time. So we always try and finish on time, and we're over today, Mel. Mel, the upcoming events?
Yes, just very quickly, we're going to be talking about the Poverty Stoplight on the 4th of March. Absolutely brilliant way of showing the change in beneficiaries. And I'm super excited to have Laura joining us on that day to share how it works. It's being used by organizations like the Clothing Bank very successfully and is absolutely brilliant. So I'm super keen to see that one. And then on the 18th of March, following on our tools theme, we're going to look at risk management and the tools that you can use to manage risk within your organizations, particularly around fundraising. And then just a little teaser for April that we have convinced Nicole Copley to do a session for us on Poppy. And I think that is going to be another bestseller. So
fantastic.
Keep a lookout for that. We're hoping the first week in April for that one. And we have seen some questions in the chat. I'm going to suggest that we put things up onto the WhatsApp group. If you want to join the WhatsApp group, it has to be by invitation now. So please get in touch with Kelvin or myself for the link. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe and stay well. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Take care.
Thanks, Mel.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.